At any rate, the point is, I was pretty stoked that Lisa won the auction. I'm happy to contribute to the financial well-being of this congregation through this service, and I'm happy that Lisa is willing to do so as well, and I'm flattered that she would pay to hear me say something, especially since, all she had to do was ask. I'd do it for free. So, not a good business decision, Lisa. Bad business decision, but good church decision. And that's as it should be. Church is not in the business. We are not a tit-for-tat based organization. We're definitely not the kind of place where if you show me your tats, I'll show you, well, I wouldn't. That may have been a bit outrageous. But it reminds me about a story I once heard about a visitor at a Unitarian Universalist church who sat through the sermon with growing anxiety and angst at the heretical ideas being spouted from the pulpit. And after the sermon and service was over, somebody asked the visitor, "So, did you like it?" And the visitor was like, "I can't believe half the things the minister said." And the member was like, "Oh, good, you'll fit right in." So we can be outrageous, right? But the point is, we are an organization centered on outrageous grace. For all of our planning, for all of our covenants, at the foundation of this enterprise is the grace that emerges when people center on spirit, justice, and community, and then stick with it. We are not transactional. Love is not transactional. So Lisa has generated an important lesson for us. Center on grace. Feel gratitude for grace. Be moved by grace. Be graceful. The irony that she's on crutches is not lost. But grace is the soul of spiritual community and the invitation to ministry. Cultivating grace. Which brings to mind another idea. It is difficult to be graceful when you are focused on yourself. Like, say, when someone prompts you to be funny. When you focus on yourself in trying to be funny, you begin to feel pressure. Often in our culture, that pressure is a manifestation of some cockamamie subconscious need to be perfect or expect perfection. But I can tell you, having written the sermon up to this point, that grace suffocates under the expectation of perfection. So good news. Given where this sermon is landing on the perfection scale, I feel like I'm doing outstanding ministry. I'm a lead by example type. Very graceful. Actually, I hope that's true, that I do lead by imperfection. And hopefully see the grace in that. I can testify to its opposite. That's for sure. Like in writing this sermon, I think I'm funny. I mean, I'm funny enough. I can crack wise and witty off the cuff and in the course of a sermon. However, when Lisa and her go-for-the-throat business instincts asked me to do a humorous reflection, I subsequently set out to try and be funny. And nothing happened. Suddenly, the method of making people laugh seemed entirely mysterious and terrifying. Because laughter is a pretty obvious thing to track in order to determine whether you are succeeding or failing. But even in that concern, you hear my ego assert itself and discourage a thing from happening. You hear grace being strangled, and that roadblock to creativity as I focus on myself. It's a difficult thing to be graceful when you are focused on yourself. So there I was with a mandate to be funny and feeling as funny as a funeral for a war criminal, and I decided to do what I do when I need to bump the reflection along: research. This would be solved by research. Research is a very safe place for me. There's no ego in research. And I learned some things about the production of humor and its psychology, which, in terms of helping me in the art of comedy, was about as effective as a clinical description of sexual reproduction to someone who's really horny. I mean, you get the idea, but it both doesn't help while increasing the need. I'll tell you one thing, though, this little assignment has highlighted for me how much I admire and envy stand-up comedians. They, not ministers, are the truth tellers of our society. They can go places we cannot. I mean, my role, even with this liberal congregation, still harbors some of that puritanical rigor mortis. I mean, I can't cuss in the pulpit, right? And I promise you, I cuss many times a day. And it neither affects the state of my soul nor the effectiveness of my work. But for some reason, if I cuss up here, I know some of you and some of me would feel that I have besmirched the institution. But it's not just cussing. No holds barred means comedians can simply go places that I cannot. Of course, they earn it. It's their job to be funny, and that is as I found out this week, really, really hard job. Man, I'm dying up here. Hey, speaking of dying, funny story. What do you call a dead Unitarian Universalist? All dressed up with no place to go. I swear to God, I'm not trying to punish Lisa. I love Lisa. Loved Lisa. But maybe Lisa was smarter than I thought. As I worked my way through this, I began to think that maybe she just really wanted a short reflection, and she knew that this was an inoffensive way to bring that about. It's hard to be funny on purpose. It's easier to be funny on accident. So, I set out to be funny on purpose, realized how impossible that was, and decided instead to write about how hard it was to be funny. Learned a little something about generosity, grace, and the limits of my role. And even though I was trying not to, I think I've made a couple of you laugh by now. So I've even failed at failing. I told you this was terrible. Though now that I've said it, it occurs to me that that would be a good koan. You know what a koan is? A ridiculous, paradoxical proposition that immediately or eventually induces one beyond the relative and into the ultimate. What is your face when you fail at failing? What is your face when you fail at failing? It's probably the same face that Lisa made when she realized that her cat had eaten all of her pot. Or maybe it was the cat's face. Lisa's cat is basically like the equivalent of the worst roommate I ever had. It wasn't yours, Ryan. That's true about Lisa's cat, by the way. I don't care what Lisa says. Don't ask her about it either. She doesn't get it right. The true story is that her cat stole all her pot and ate it. And this is where we link back into Mother's Day with stoned calicos. You see, that story I just told you about Lisa's cat, that's what I call a mom story. You know who I learned mom stories from? Mom. Now, a lot of you know my mom. I know my mom. But here's the thing about my mom that you all may not know and you need to know. And I should have told you a long time ago. Do not believe a word she says, especially about me. My mom is basically a wizard. She has the ability to bend reality to the power of her storytelling. We should all thank God that she's an optimist. Whatever's going on, my mom can make it suit her by thinking and talking about it in the best light. She's very powerful in that way. It also helps that she has 100 times more energy than me. But this narrative power that she has sometimes runs amok. She has told stories about me, to me, that were impossible for me to be alive, even to take part in. I shouldn't complain, though. I usually get to be better and more heroic, sometimes more ridiculous version of me in her stories. But I also suspect that she's not the only mom with this propensity. So mom stories are the stories that the teller prefers, that carry in them some connective tissue. Like, I will always know and love Lisa for her cartel kitty, whether or not anything like what I remember actually happened. And we'll just hope that your boss never comes to church. But mom stories also highlight one other thing that I'd like to leave you with today, because this rambling tragic comedy of a reflection has stumbled into some salience from time to time, and I'd like to leave you with a bit more of it. If there's one thing that I have learned in 8 years of ministry that enables me to be open-hearted to those within and beyond our walls, that is also perfectly highlighted and underscored by the genre of the mom story, it is this: everyone is crazy. Everyone is crazy. You and you and me and you and the first person you see when you leave church today, and everyone you see, and the person that you trust most that you don't know, but you trust them because you see them on TV. Everyone is crazy, goofy, loose of screw, and a little off. No exceptions. It's my own version of universalism. Now, you may be offended by that, but I didn't cuss. And besides, if you approach the world like that, knowing that everyone's nuts, everything just makes so much more sense. And my ability to deal with it, that is, to deal with you, becomes that much easier, that much better, that much more graceful. The acknowledgement of crazy is an invitation to grace. Like Lisa, it was crazy to ask me to write a funny reflection. Do it again. What does it mean if you see a UU kneeling with her head bowed? It means that she's tying her shoelace. And what do you get if you put two Unitarian Universalists together? 3 opinions. May you recognize the insanity in our midst and live in a grace-filled world.